The grand chamber of the concordance hummed with a silence more profound than any sound. It was the silence of a held breath, of 1,000 ancient worlds poised on the precipice of a decision that would unravel the delicate tapestry of galactic peace woven over millennia. High luminary Xylon of the Cathar felt the resonance of this tension in his own crystalline form, a subtle, discordant vibration that traveled from the polished obsidian floor, up through the stanchions of his ceremonial platform, and into the very core of his being. His multifaceted eyes, accustomed to perceiving the universe in spectra far beyond the crude visual light of younger species, absorbed the scene with a weary gravitas. The air, a carefully curated mixture of inert gases and psychic dampeners, tasted of ozone and fear. Below him, the amphitheater descended in sweeping tiers, each platform occupied by a delegation from one of the Concordance's member systems. Beings of silicate, gaseous, and biological origin shimmered, pulsed, and shifted in the dim, stately light filtering down from the chamber's vaulted ceiling, which was not a ceiling at all, but a living star map, a perfect, real-time representation of their galaxy. At the heart of the chamber, a colossal holographic display shimmered, showing the source of their shared anxiety. It was a world, or what had been a world. Veridian it had been named by its creators, a small, remote colony world barely a whisper on the galactic charts settled by the newcomers, the humans. Now it was a silent, gray sphere. The image was stark, relayed by long-range drones that dared not approach too closely. There were no energy signatures, no communications. No bioscans that registered anything more complex than residual bacteria. The cities, once growing nodes of light on the planet's verdant surface, were now little more than geometric scars, etched onto a canvas of ash. The Glorn hegemony, in a swift and brutal assertion of their claimed territorial rights, had descended upon the colony and purged it. The act itself, while barbaric, was not unprecedented in the long, bloody history of the galaxy. It was the aftermath that was so deeply unsettling. The humans had done nothing. For 3 standard rotations, the Terran Confederacy, the political entity governing this perplexing species, had remained utterly, unnervingly silent. Their fleets, which patrolled their own small sphere of influence with a quiet efficiency, had not moved. Their diplomats, usually so verbose and persistent, had recalled themselves from every concordance outpost without a word of protest or condemnation. Their hypercom channels, which normally chattered with a chaotic symphony of art, data, and commerce, had fallen completely dark to all outside inquiries. This silence was a vacuum, and into that vacuum the rest of the galaxy was pouring its fear, its arrogance, and its confusion. Warlord Grakthal of the Glorn hegemony rose from his delegation's plinth, his massive, chitinous form scraping against the stone. His voice, a low, guttural rasp amplified by his translator unit, boomed across the chamber, thick with contempt. "We have waited long enough for this concordance to act. The evidence is clear. The humans are a broken people. We struck one of their nests, and they cowered in their home system. They are weak, a species defined by fleeting emotions and a fragile biology. Their silence is the silence of terror. I say again what I proposed at the start of this session. We should press our advantage. Their worlds are rich, their technology novel, however primitive. We should absorb them into the hegemony, bring them under our guiding strength before they collapse under their own cowardice." A murmur swept through the assembled delegations. The Glorn philosophy was simple. Strength was the only legitimate currency in the universe. The strong expanded and the weak were assimilated or erased. It was a brutal but predictable worldview. For many, it was a comforting one. The humans, with their strange and contradictory nature, were anything but predictable. Xylon allowed the murmur to fade before he activated his own vocal resonator. His voice was not loud, but it carried a clarity that cut through the chamber's heavy atmosphere, a series of pure harmonic chimes that the translator rendered into calm, measured galactic standard. The warlord of the Glorn speaks of silence as if it has only one meaning. Yet in our long existence, the Cathar have learned that a vacuum can be a precursor to a storm, and a moment of quiet can be the drawing of a deep and terrible breath. He shifted his gaze back to the dead world in the hologram. "We have studied the humans since their first clumsy broadcasts pierced the void. More than any species we have ever encountered, they are a paradox. They are capable of sentimentality that is almost pathological, creating art of breathtaking beauty and mourning their dead with rituals that can span generations. In the same breath, they have waged wars against their own kind with a ferocity and totality that makes the Glorn's ritualized conquests seem like mere posturing. They have slaughtered each other over disagreements of philosophy, of resource distribution, of simple pride. Their history is a litany of self-inflicted wounds. Gracthal let out a grating approximation of a laugh. You make my point for me, luminary. They are self-destructive, chaotic. A species at war with itself has no strength to face an external power like the hegemony. Or, Xylon countered, his tone dropping to a lower, more resonant frequency, a register of profound seriousness. They have, through this brutal history, perfected the very concept of war in a way you or I can barely comprehend. The Glorn's way is the culling of the weak. The human way, when truly invoked, has been the annihilation of ideas, of cultures, of entire ideologies. They do not just defeat their enemies, they seek to erase the very reason for the conflict. It is a terrifying, absolute form of violence. We have observed that they reserve this totality for themselves. Towards us, towards the galaxy, they have been cautious, diplomatic, almost deferential. But you, warlord, you did not just break a treaty. You did not just raid an outpost. You extinguished a civilian world, a world filled with their families, their young. You have, I fear, shown them something they have historically only ever shown to each other. The silicate delegate, a swirling column of sentient nanites designated as Observer 7, projected its calm, synthesized voice into the chamber. High Luminary Xylon's assessment aligns with our data. The absence of a conventional response is a statistical anomaly. All prior models of human behavior based on their interspecies conflicts predicted one of two outcomes: a rapid, retaliatory strike or a formal declaration of war accompanied by furious diplomatic protest. This sustained, coordinated silence is new. It suggests a unified, species-wide decision. A consensus has been reached. We simply do not know what that consensus is. This was the core of their fear. The unknown. Humans were already a disquieting presence. Their technology was a bizarre patchwork of elegant, hyper-advanced systems and what appeared to be crude, brute-force engineering. Their ships ran on contained fusion, a messy and inefficient power source by concordant standards, yet they could manipulate gravitational fields with a finesse that even the Cathar, masters of spacetime geometry, found impressive. Their culture was a chaotic explosion of creativity and contradiction. And their psychology, that was the greatest enigma of all. They felt emotions with a depth that was destabilizing, yet they could be as cold and logical as a silicate observer when circumstances demanded. The debate raged on. The avian xylopods, ever cautious, fluttered nervously on their perches, advocating for a preemptive apology to be sent to the human homeworld. The massive, stone-like beings of the granitic fold argued for reinforcing the concordance's borders, for creating a galactic wall against the unpredictable humans. Gracthal and his allies, a coalition of militaristic, expansionist powers, saw only an opportunity. They smelled blood in the water, and the silence of their prey was, to them, an invitation to the slaughter. Xylon listened, his ancient mind sifting through the arguments, the posturing, the fear. He had spent the last 3 rotations in deep communion with the Cathar archives, reviewing every fragment of information ever gathered on humanity. He watched their art, their dramas, their historical records. He saw a species that built cathedrals to their gods and then built weapons to kill those who worshipped a different god. He saw them compose symphonies that could make a Cathar's crystalline structure resonate with sorrow. And then he saw them march in perfect, unthinking unison to their own destruction. They were a species that dreamed of stars, and yet spent most of its energy fouling its own nest. And in all of it he saw a single terrifying thread, a concept they called escalation. For most concordant species, conflict was a tool, a means to an end, governed by ritual and tradition. For humans, it was a fire. It could be a small, controlled burn, but if provoked, if fueled by sufficient rage or grief, it could become a conflagration that consumed everything, including the one who started it. They were a species that would burn down their own house to kill a single intruder. He was about to voice this final, chilling thought when a new sound cut through the chamber. It was a soft, insistent chime, the alert for an unscheduled Priority 1 communication. The chamber fell silent once more. The star map on the ceiling shifted, zooming in on the heavily guarded star system that housed the Concordance capital. A single, blinking rune appeared at the system's edge. The chief astrogation officer's voice, filtered through the chamber's comm system, was strained with disbelief. "High Luminary, we have a vessel. It just appeared. It did not use a standard hyperlane. It did not exit from a wormhole. Our sensors show a momentary disruption in local spacetime, and then it was simply there. It is of unknown design, broadcasting on a frequency reserved for diplomatic contact." Grachthal's mandibles clicked in agitation. Is it human? Its origin signature is Terran, the officer confirmed, her voice now a whisper of awe and fear. It is hailing us. A single vessel. It is broadcasting a message on repeat. It says its occupant is a duly appointed emissary of the Terran Confederacy. She requests permission to approach and address the Concordance Assembly. A wave of shock rippled through the delegations. Not a fleet, not a declaration of war sent across the void. A single ship, a single emissary. After 3 rotations of absolute silence after the annihilation of one of their worlds, their response was to send one person to talk. Grachthal threw his head back and let out a booming, incredulous laugh that echoed through the vast hall. One ship, one diplomat, they are not just weak, they are fools. They have come to beg for mercy. Grant the request. Let this emissary come and plead for her species' survival. I wish to see the look in her eyes as I tell her there will be no mercy. Xylon did not share the warlord's confidence. A deep, cold certainty settled into his being, a resonance of pure, unadulterated dread. The humans were not fools, and they had not come to beg. The silence was over. The deep, terrible breath had been taken, and now something was about to be exhaled. He looked at the holographic image of the dead world, Veridian, and for the first time he did not see it as a symbol of human weakness, but as a catalyst, a line that had been crossed. He signaled his assent, his chime ringing with a finality that felt like the tolling of a great and ancient bell. Permission was granted. The human was coming. The human ship was an exercise in unsettling subtlety. As it slipped through the layers of the Concordance's orbital defenses, it projected none of the expected markers of a vessel of any importance. It was small, a sliver of polished, obsidian-like material, devoid of visible weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, or even running lights. It did not roar with the fury of fusion drives. It moved with an impossible liquid grace, as if space itself was bending to its will. The defense grid controllers reported with growing anxiety that they could not get a proper lock on it. Its energy signature was a flat line, its mass seemed to fluctuate, and its quantum profile was absent. It was like a hole in the universe, shaped like a starship. It docked at the diplomatic spire with the gentle finality of a falling leaf. The emissary who emerged was equally confounding. The Concordance had prepared for a military official, clad in armor, or a grieving politician, their face etched with rage and sorrow. Instead, the being that walked into the grand chamber was a woman, dressed in a simple, dark gray tunic of unadorned fabric. Her name, transmitted ahead of her, was Eva Rostova. She was neither old nor young. Her face was calm, her eyes a placid shade of blue-gray. She carried no data slate, wore no interface device, and was accompanied by no guards. She walked with a steady, unhurried pace up the central aisle, her soft-soled boots making no sound on the obsidian floor. The fear and tension in the chamber were so thick they were a physical presence, yet she moved through them as if she were taking a stroll through a garden. She stopped at the designated speaker's platform in the center of the chamber, directly beneath the haunting image of the dead Veridian. She stood there for a long moment, her gaze sweeping across the tiered rows of alien beings, her expression unreadable. She did not seem intimidated by the towering form of Warlord Grachthal, or the ethereal glow of Xylon, or the sheer, overwhelming alienness of the assembly. She seemed patient. Grachthal, unable to contain his arrogance, spoke first, his voice dripping with scorn. "Human, you are brave, I will grant you that, or perhaps simply ignorant. You stand in the heart of the power that crushed your colony. Have you come to offer your species surrender? Speak your plea so that we may deny it." Ambassador Rostova turned her head slowly to face the Glorn plinth. Her eyes met the warlord's multiple glowing optics. When she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and unamplified, yet it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. The translator units rendered it without inflection, a pure transmission of intent. "I am not here to plead, Warlord Grachthal, and the Terran Confederacy does not surrender." She turned her attention back to the chamber at large, her gaze moving from one delegation to the next, acknowledging them all. "I am here to deliver a message." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The silence in the chamber was now absolute, a perfect vessel waiting to be filled. "For 3 of your standard rotations, my species has been silent. You have, in your wisdom, interpreted this as fear, as weakness, as indecision. It was none of those things. It was a period of observance, a time of mourning for the 100,000 souls you extinguished on Veridian, and it was a time of decision." She gestured upwards towards the holographic planet. "My species is young by your standards. We are fractious, emotional, and often contradictory. We have spent much of our history in conflict with ourselves. High Luminary Xylon is correct in his assessment. We have perfected war in ways you cannot imagine because we have practiced it on our most intimate enemies, each other. But through that fire, we have learned a fundamental lesson. We have learned to draw lines. Not in the sand, but in the soul. Lines that, once crossed, change the nature of the universe forever. Her voice remained level, but it took on a chilling, pedagogical quality, as if she were a scholar explaining a fundamental law of physics. The concordance operates on a model of limited conflict. Your wars are extensions of policy, tools of negotiation. They have rules, rituals, and acceptable losses. You fight for territory, for resources, for honor. Humanity understands these motivations. We have indulged in them ourselves. We have tolerated your probing of our borders, your spying, your political maneuvering. We consider these actions to be within the established rules of the galactic game. But what the Glorn hegemony did at Veridian, she said, her voice dropping almost to a whisper, though it lost none of its carrying power, was not part of the game. It was not a war. It was an extermination. You did not defeat a military force. You erased a population. You burned schools and hospitals and homes. You targeted civilians. You crossed a line that my species drew for itself long ago in our own blood. Grakthul made a dismissive sound, a chittering of his mandibles. The distinction is meaningless. The weak perish. It is the way of the universe. No, Rostova replied, her gaze locking onto him with an intensity that seemed to make the very air around her grow cold. It is the way of your universe, and that is the decision my people have reached. We have decided that your universe, with its casual brutality and its philosophy of acceptable atrocity, is no longer one in which we are willing to participate. Therefore, we are changing the rules. A flicker of confusion passed through the assembly. Xylon felt a strange resonance shift within his own being, the premonition of a paradigm about to be shattered. Rostova made a subtle gesture with her hand. In the holographic display, the image of the dead Veridian was replaced by something new. It was not a weapon. It was not a fleet. It was a complex, rotating diagram of what looked like a mathematical equation, rendered in three-dimensional, moving light. It was elegant, beautiful, and utterly incomprehensible to every being in the chamber, save for the silicate observers, whose swirling forms began to pulse with frantic, agitated light. For generations, Rostova continued, her voice the calm center of a growing storm of confusion, you have assessed our technology. You have noted our fusion drives, our kinetic weapons, our laser defenses. You have cataloged them, analyzed them, and deemed them adequate but primitive. You were mistaken. What you were observing were not our primary systems. They were insulation. A deliberate facade designed to allow us to interact with you on a level you would understand, a level that would not cause undue alarm. Observer 7's synthesized voice cut in, strained and sharp with something that sounded like digital panic. The equations, the principles this diagram describes, this is not engineering. This is cosmology. It posits a fundamental relationship between space-time geometry, quantum entanglement, and zero-point energy that it is not possible. Our most foundational models of physics forbid it. Your models are incomplete, Rostova stated simply. My people discovered long ago that the universe is not a locked room with fixed laws. It is a text, and with sufficient understanding, the text can be edited. Our true technology is not based on manipulating energy or matter. It is based on manipulating reality itself. She raised her hand again. For a fraction of a second, the light in the grand chamber changed. It wasn't that it grew dimmer or brighter. The very quality of the light, its texture, its color, its fundamental properties, shifted to something alien and then snapped back. An object on the Glorn warlord's plinth, a ceremonial dagger of immense cultural value, flickered, its atoms disassociating into a cloud of shimmering dust before reassembling themselves perfectly. The entire event took less than a heartbeat, but every sensor in the chamber screamed. Grakthul stared at his dagger, his chitinous plates clicking together in a sound of pure, instinctual fear. That, Rostova said into the stunned silence, was a demonstration, executed from my ship in high orbit. We do not need to travel through space to touch you, warlord. We do not need ships or weapons or armies in the conventional sense. When you destroyed Veridian, you were a predator burning an anthill. You were unaware that the ants had learned to control the laws of physics that make fire possible. The full weight of her words began to settle upon the assembly. The implications were staggering, world-shattering. Humanity was not a young, primitive race. They were something else entirely, something that had been hiding its true nature behind a mask of mediocrity. Xylon's mind reeled. It was not a lie of commission, but a lie of omission, a deception so profound, so patient, that it bordered on a form of art. They had allowed the galaxy to underestimate them, to misjudge them, to treat them as children, all while possessing a power that could unmake stars. The question was why? Why hide such a capability? Rostova answered the unspoken question. We did this not out of malice, but out of a desire for peace, a peace you could not have given us if you knew our true nature. You would have feared us, deified us, or sought to destroy us out of terror. We wanted none of those things. We simply wanted to be left alone, to build, to learn, to explore. But the Glorn hegemony, and by its inaction the concordance, has made it clear that this is not possible in the galaxy as it is currently defined. She turned her serene, unblinking gaze back towards the assembly, her face a mask of calm resolve. She was no longer just an emissary. She was an oracle delivering a prophecy that she herself had written. And so I am here to deliver Earth's final message to the galaxy. It is not a negotiation. It is not a declaration. It is a statement of fact. A new law of the universe, as certain as gravity or the decay of time. She took a slow breath. You wanted war, now you have it. The words, the title of her message, hung in the air, chilling the very soul of every being present. But the meaning was not what they had expected. This is not the war you know, she clarified, her voice resonating with the weight of a promise that could not be broken. We will not be conquering your worlds. We will not be enslaving your people or seizing your resources. We have no interest in empire. This is a war on the very concept of your kind of war. It is a war against the idea that the strong may prey upon the weak, that civilian lives are acceptable losses, that extermination is a valid tool of statecraft. From this moment forward, a new protocol is in effect. We will be watching. Any vessel, any fleet, any nation that attacks a civilian population anywhere in this galaxy will be subject to correction. Any government that orders such an attack will be dissolved. We will not use bombs. We will not use armies. We will simply reach across the void and edit you out of existence. Your ships will cease to be. Your weapons will transmute into inert metals. Your leaders who give such orders will find their bodies no longer obey the laws of biology. We will enforce a peace, the peace of the graveyard if necessary. She looked directly at Grakthul, whose arrogance had finally shattered, replaced by a pallid, trembling fear. Warlord, your hegemony is the first to be subject to this new law. Your attack on Viridian was a crime against the sentient condition itself. Your punishment is not death, but irrelevance. As we speak, every foundry in the Glorn hegemony capable of producing a weapon of war is being transmuted into solid, useless iron. Every warship in your fleet, every fighter, every troop transport is having its drive systems and weapon arrays fused into slag. Your ability to project military power beyond your own atmosphere is, as of this moment, permanently and irrevocably gone. You have been disarmed, not just for a generation, but for all time. Your people will live, but your way of life, the way of the conqueror, is over. You will learn to build, not to break. The choice to learn is yours. The capacity for breaking has been taken from you. In the chamber, a dozen Glorn aides began frantically working their data slates, their movements jerky with panic. Their expressions, a mixture of disbelief turning to horror, confirmed her words. Frantic messages were flooding in from their homeworld. It was true. The mighty Glorn war machine, the terror of their galactic quadrant for 1,000 years, had been neutralized in a matter of minutes without a single shot fired. Rostova's gaze returned to the assembly. This is our final message, but it is also our first. It is an invitation. We invite you to a new galaxy, a galaxy where strength is measured not by the ability to destroy, but by the ability to create. A galaxy where disputes are settled by minds, not by weapons. A galaxy where no child of any species will ever again have to look to the sky and fear what might fall from it. We did not want this role. We did not ask for the responsibility. But you, with your actions, have forced our hand. We will be the guardians of this new peace. We will be the shepherds of the quiet worlds. We will be the monsters in the dark to those who would prey on the innocent. We will do this because we have looked into the abyss of total war, and we have vowed never to let another species fall into it. She lowered her hand. Her speech was over. The chamber was a tomb of silent, stunned beings, their entire conception of the universe, of power, of humanity, shattered into a million pieces. The small, fragile-looking species they had debated dismissing as a nuisance was, in fact, an entity of almost cosmological power. A sleeping giant not woken by a shout, but by the crying of its children. Xylon looked at the human woman at her calm face, and he finally understood the true nature of their paradox. Their capacity for savagery and their capacity for compassion were not opposites. They were two sides of the same coin. Their deep, emotional understanding of suffering was what gave birth to their absolute, logical, and terrifyingly effective methods of preventing it. They were not cruel. They were simply final. They had suffered so much at their own hands that they could not, allow that brand of suffering to become the currency of the galaxy. He slowly, deliberately activated his resonator. The chimes were soft, filled with a new and profound sense of awe. "Ambassador Rostova," he began, his translated voice filled with a gravity that silenced even the panicked whispers of the Glorn delegation. "On behalf of the Cathar people, and I suspect on behalf of the future of this concordance, we have received your message, and we accept your terms." The unity of the concordance was reforged in the fires of a revelation so profound it amounted to a spiritual conversion. The vote to censure the Glorn hegemony was a mere formality. The hegemony as a galactic power no longer existed. The real work began in the rotations that followed Ambassador Rostova's departure. The human ship vanished from orbit as silently and mysteriously as it had arrived, leaving behind a galaxy irrevocably changed. The concordance was no longer a body for mediating the squabbles of ambitious powers. It was now a forum for coming to terms with a new reality, a reality in which a silent, watchful guardian had declared an end to the old ways. Xylon found himself at the center of this new epoch. His initial caution regarding the humans was now seen as prescient wisdom. He worked tirelessly with the other delegations, helping them navigate the psychological shock. Some species, like the granitic fold, were relieved. They had long advocated for a more stable, less violent galaxy. Others, like the former allies of the Glorn, were terrified, their own expansionist ambitions now rendered impossible. But all in time began to see the logic, the stark and undeniable ethics, behind the human ultimatum. It was not the act of a conqueror. It was the act of a parent taking away a dangerous toy from a child who refused to learn not to harm others with it. A new era of communication was opened with the Terran Confederacy. The humans, it turned out, were willing and patient teachers. They shared data, not on their reality-altering technology that they made clear was a burden they would bear alone, but on everything else. Medicine, art, social theory, agricultural science. They flooded the Concordance archives with knowledge, asking for nothing in return. They were no longer silent, but their communications were measured, calm, and focused. They were helping the galaxy build a future worth protecting. Several cycles passed. The galaxy began to heal. Trade flourished in the absence of piracy and militaristic tariffs. Old feuds between species began to dissolve, replaced by collaborative scientific and cultural projects. The disarmed Glorn, after a period of internal chaos, began to rebuild their society around industry and art, their innate aggression channeled into a fierce and competitive creativity. It seemed that humanity's gambit had worked. Their terrible promise had birthed a golden age of peace. It was during one of these new collaborative sessions, a joint Cathar-human astronomical survey, that the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Xylon was in communion with Ambassador Rostova once more, not in the Grand Chamber, but via a secure holographic link that spanned the light years between their worlds. They were discussing the analysis of deep space sensor readings from a probe sent far beyond the galactic rim into the true void between galaxies. "The patterns are fascinating, high luminary," Rostova was saying, her image flickering with calm academic interest. "The background radiation out there is not as uniform as our models predicted. There are voids, pockets of absolute zero where not even quantum foam seems to exist, and more than that, there are faint, structured signals, incredibly ancient. They seem to be repeating, but the cycle is so long it has taken us a century to identify the pattern." "A message?" Xylon resonated, his curiosity piqued. "We believe so," Rostova confirmed. "It is not a greeting. We have managed to translate fragments of the mathematics. It appears to be a warning." Xylon felt a familiar, cold resonance begin to build within him, the same dread he had felt when the human ship first appeared. A warning about what? The ambassador's calm expression finally broke, replaced by a look of profound, ancient weariness. It was a look that Xylon now understood as the true face of humanity, not their anger or their joy, but their heavy, self-imposed burden of knowledge. "It's the answer to the question you never asked, Luminary," she said softly. "Why? Why did we develop this technology? Why did we seek the ability to edit reality? It was never for you. It was never for the Glorn or for our own internal squabbles. It was for this." She gestured, and the star map in Xylon's private meditation chamber changed. It pulled back, away from their galaxy, showing it as a beautiful, swirling spiral of light in a vast, empty darkness. And then, from that darkness, other signals were highlighted. Faint, repeating warnings coming from the direction of dozens of other galaxies, all seemingly pointing towards a central, unseen point in the intergalactic void. We found the first warning buried in our own solar system, left by a species that visited our world before life here was even complex, Rostova explained. It told us the truth of the universe. Life is not a random accident. It is a crop, and it is periodically harvested. The coldness in Xylon's core intensified. Harvested by what? We don't know what they are. The warning only gives them a name, a concept. It calls them the Scythe, a force, a fleet, a form of life we don't know that sweeps through the universe on a cycle that spans millions of years. It moves from galaxy to galaxy, and it consumes all complex biological and technological civilizations. It leaves behind only the seeds of new life to grow and flourish for the next cycle. It is the universe's great, terrible filter. The full, mind-shattering truth descended upon Xylon. Humanity's secrecy, their desperate, hidden technological arms race, their absolute intolerance for galactic infighting. It all made sense. You have been preparing, Xylon chimed, his voice barely a whisper. Not for a war with us, but for a war for us, for all of us. The Scythe is coming, Rostova said, her voice now filled with the gravity of a billion dying stars. According to the timetable in the warnings, it will reach our galaxy next. We estimate its arrival in less than 500 of your standard years. All of our history, our self-inflicted violence, our rapid, desperate climb up the technological ladder. It has all been a frantic, desperate effort to build a wall against the coming tide. We needed peace. We needed stability. We needed the galaxy's resources and minds focused on the real threat, not on petty turf wars. She looked at him, her human eyes filled with a sorrowful, resolute fire. We could not tell you the truth. You would have panicked. It would have caused chaos, despair. You were not ready, so we had to make you ready. We had to become the villain, the stern parent, the monster in the dark. We had to force you to grow up by whatever means necessary because the true night is falling. Xylon stood in his chamber long after the communication ended, the holographic image of their galaxy hanging in the air before him, no longer looking like a cradle of life, but like a single, fragile candle in an infinite, encroaching darkness. He finally understood. He understood the meaning of the dead world of Veridian. He understood the cold, logical fury of the human response. He understood their final message. You wanted war. The Glorn had wanted a small, simple war of conquest. They had no idea what they were asking for. Now you have it. Humanity had given them one, not a war of territory or resources, not a war against the Glorn or the Concordance. They had dragged the entire galaxy, kicking and screaming, into the only war that ever truly mattered, a war for survival, a war against the silent, hungry dark. The final message from Earth was not an ultimatum delivered to the galaxy. It was a summons. They were not declaring war on them. They were inviting them to theirs. And as Xylon looked out at the stardusted void, he knew, with a certainty that resonated through every facet of his being, that his people and every living soul in the galaxy would accept.